Hello, everyone. My name is Lori Ann Minoff. I am the local president here in Broward for Women's Council of Realtors. I am joined with the 2013 past national president, Anita Davis. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
I'm glad I could be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course. Wanted to give you an opportunity to share a brief introduction about yourself so we can get to know you better.
Well, I'm getting ready to celebrate my 30th year in real estate this year. So it's been kind of interesting looking back on all that. My first year in the business, I had just finished my first anniversary in Women's Council when my mentor, who I had when I started, who is now became my business partner, she said to me, okay, you've been in real estate a year. It's time to get involved, because you need to give back to the industry that's going to give to you.
Love it.
So she handed me a brochure for Women's Council, and she gave me the phone number to the board and said, give me $85 for Women's Council and go volunteer at the board.
Pretty
And that's the way
simplistic. I love it.
And that's the way it usually starts. And I said, well, before I do that, tell me a little bit about this Women's Council of Realtors. And she said to me, this is where all the movers and shakers of real estate are going to be.
Love it.
And you need to get to know them if you're going to work in this industry. There's nothing better than to have a relationship with the agent you're working with across the table. And this is your opportunity to get to know those agents.
I
And
couldn't
I
agree
thought,
more.
okay, here's my money. That sounds great. And then that was, I think, somewhere in the summer, spring or summertime. And at Christmas time, she was heading out the door to do something. She goes, come with me. We're doing our Christmas appreciation for the Board of Realtors. The Women's Council always does an appreciation for them. We're going to go up and buy poinsettias and do stuff like that. She goes, I'll make you the chair of the committee. Come on. And before I knew it, in the spring, they said, we want you to be our president-elect. I said, well, wait a minute, aren't there some roles before you get there? And they said, yeah, but this is what we want you to do. So we want you to run it. And that was the beginning of my journey.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
So kind of segueing nicely into, kind of building up. As a past national president of Women's Council of Realtors, what would you say are some of the major contributions that you made to the organization during your tenure?
You know, it's funny, you think that going into a leadership role, you say, I have these goals, I'm going to get this done, I'm going to make these changes, and this is what's going to happen. And you have a list, and if you can get one point across, you're successful. And I think that a few things, and I think we're going to talk about those things as we move on, are the way I related to my team. I think that getting feedback from your team and making sure they understand the process while you're going along. They say that if the person behind you does a better job than you, you've done your job. So bringing along the leaders along the way, I think, is a really important point. Being accessible to the membership. I think that was, really important to me, is having anybody walk up to me and talk to me and ask questions and say things. One time, my year as president, you go around, you speak to all the local networks, chapters at the time, but networks now. And I had been in Florida earlier that year, and I had made a comment during my presentation, and I said, we are a women's organization. We promote women in leadership. We build leaders through our experiences. I said, but you men, I want you to understand, you're 10% of our membership, and you have a role here as well. And here's what your role is. When you're sitting at a table and you look around and every face you see is the same. It's all male, all probably, gray-haired white men. I want you to speak up and say, we need diversity at this table. And one of those types of diversity are women.
Yeah.
So we want you to be our advocates, that you need to have that diverse voice at the table. And then the other thing is that you are not eliminated from any of this education at all during our process. And when you come and join us like that, you become our diversity, because we need your voice at the table as well. And I had said that at this meeting in Florida. And that fall, we were in San Francisco, the year I was president, for the NAR meetings. Meetings are over. I'm packed up. I'm walking through the lobby with my kids. And this man runs up to me and he said, Anita, I've been a member of Women's Council for years. And he goes, this year, I finally felt like I was valued.
Wow.
And I thank you for that. So if I say, if I accomplished something, I think it's having the members understand that it's all about them. It's not just about the leaders in the organization. It's about each individual member and the value they bring.
Love it. Absolutely love it. So, I mean, you kind of touched on some of these already, but maybe we could kind of elaborate more on them. But so do you think are some of the significant initiatives during your presidency, and any of which that you believe currently still have a lasting impact on the organization?
I do. I think I made one significant impact. And like I said, you make one, but it's funny, if you listen to Cindy Reddy, she said it's something that my team behind me continued. So that's how I know it made an impact. I said to the local leaders, I said, when you're planning your programming, if you can't answer yes to one of these two questions, then the programming isn't the right programming to have.
Mm-hmm.
Is it making our members financially more viable? Because if they're not financially viable, they can't be members of Women's Council. They can't be members of the real estate community. They have to be making money in order to support their lives. If it's not going to make them financially viable or more efficient, then you're probably not doing the right programming. Because when I came into Women's Council, I can remember Dress for Success and having a plastic surgeon come and talk about how he could enhance our looks, and I said, we are a business organization. Our programming should be business related. And I heard my team utilize that line as they led themselves. And I think that's a significant initiative. If I did anything, I helped them realize the importance of what programming does.
Yeah. No, it's so valuable, and it really is like the crux of everything that we do. And I feel like we're so busy these days that we think to ourselves, like, what organizations are we going to be a part of? Okay, so if it's going to cost me money to do this and it's going to cost me time away from my business and my family, educating people, giving people the tools, giving them the resources, helping to kind of build a better professional is something that, kind of radiates volumes, I feel like, with the organization.
Bring something of value.
Yeah. Total value.
Value. Absolutely. Yes.
All right. So how would you describe your overall leadership style, and how do you think it differed than some of your predecessors?
It's funny. We all have our own ways of doing things. But I've never been one to say my word is the only word at the table. Don't get me wrong. I will fight for my convictions, just like everybody around me will fight for theirs. But there is a time when you need to listen to the masses, and it makes a difference. And so I tried to include my team on every decision that had to be made, knowing that it was ultimately my decision and it was going to hang on my shoulders, whatever the decision was. But I included them in probably 90% of my communications. we had the AE that we had for Women's Council at the time, his name was Gary Chrysler. And I have to say that Gary taught me a lot when it came to leadership style. I saw how he ran his staff, and I said, he appreciated them, he respected them. But if they had a task, the task had to be done. And he also taught me that sometimes it's best to say nothing. And I learned that I learned a lot from Ann DeFries came before me as president of our organization, and I watched Ann smile sometimes, and knowing that that smile just meant, okay, I'm just going to wait till you're done and keep on moving. And all Gary did to me one time was reach over and put his hand on my arm and said, you don't have to respond. And I learned, like I said, we have to learn from those around us. And if I taught a little bit of that to the people on my team, then it made me a successful leader.
I love it.
I want everybody behind me to be better. And that just means that each person has taught a lesson to whatever that person is coming behind them.
And it's so true, because silence does speak volumes sometimes. Sometimes people perceive it as weakness, and then I have to say something or I have to address it. But no, because sometimes it's a lot of times, many times people just need to be heard. So I really kind of feel like you can kind of connect with people better in just listening. And we talked about, I think on some of these calls, even active listening, can go a long way.
Oh, well, that's, I utilize that. So now in my life is a little different now. I'm still in production, but I also coach for one of the top coaches out in our industry. And one of the things I say to my coaching clients sometimes, it says, just listen, ask lots of questions and listen. And then when they respond, say, oh, I heard what you said. Now, how can we address that so that they know you're listening to them? And I think that's part of good leadership as well. I think that's why I said, when we said about, what major contributions, I said, just being approachable, to be able to have someone come up, because and looking at them while they're doing it, so that who they are and what their concerns are, and not looking over their shoulder and trying to see who they can catch next.
So true. So what types of challenges did you face during your presidency, and how did you address them?
Ooh, I had a major challenge during my presidency, which, funny, it took years to accomplish. We were trying to reorganize the regions. We had 9 regions at the time, and we were trying to get them down to 3, ironically, West, Central, and East. And there were major objections. And during one of what we used to have, we had governing board working sessions. And we were only trying to workshop the idea. And a particular section of our organization just did not want this change. And it was a big challenge. And so, sometimes you look at the challenges and say, okay, this isn't the right time. This isn't the right time, but look where we are now.
Right.
Look where we are now.
We're here.
So when it came around and the bylaws change came, I was like, oh, it took 10 years, but look at that. We got it done. So it was, you look at the challenges and say, is it sort of like with your kids, like you said earlier, is it worth the battle to win the war?
Right.
And sometimes it's just not worth that. You have to step back and say, it's not the right time. It doesn't mean that the concept isn't right.
Right.
It's just not the right time. And I think I think that's a big thing that some of our local leaders don't understand. And it's because, you know, we train our leaders through experience. And this is one of the first levels of experience they have. And so I think it's a good thing to learn. But even on the line at national, I was learning. You know how I said about me being influential to the line behind me, the
Yeah.
women in front of me on that line had an amazing impact on the type of leader I became once I was, you know, in that position. So
Incredible.
you never stop learning, never.
So this kind of, excuse me, segues nicely into the next question regarding mentorship. So it plays a big role in leadership, but what impact do you believe your mentorship had on the council's members, as you mentioned before, kind of, you know, continuing? It's almost like two directions, you know, you're kind of being, you know, trying to go toward your, you know, kind of help your current team, but then at the same time kind of also impact, you know, on a national scale. But how do you think that that helped in terms of fostering growth and development?
You know, I think we go back to the accessibility thing. During our years as leaders, our group chose to sit down, pick up the phone, and call every local person, every local leader in our organization, just to say, hey, I'm just calling to see how things are going. You know, and I can remember some of the responses. Oh my gosh, I'm talking to the national president. No, you're just talking to another member.
Right.
I'm a member just like you are. And I just want you to know that as a member, as a leader, that we're all here for you. And at the time we were, you know, our membership was up. So we had a lot of people in our organization. And I said, we just want you to know we're here for you. You don't have to go to the next step. There's not a ladder here. We're all here for you. And so I think being a mentor to every person out there and knowing the leadership team was doing that, I think had a huge impact. I think the one thing that Women's Council does is gives you almost like an extended family. And when you know you have that safe place to be, to try, and even if you fail, you're still going to be supported. I think that, you know, I think that kind of impact, I lost my brother during my tenure. And it was, I was getting ready to fly down to Atlanta to speak to the, whether the Georgia State meetings or something like that. And I was going down early to spend some time with my brother, and my brother passed away like the week before I was going. And my team in Atlanta, especially Joe Kenny, is like, do you want me to go over to the hospital and take care of things? Do you want me to do this? Do you want me to do that? They were my family at that time. And, you know, the impact, and even when I was there and I said to them, I said, you know, first of all, I want to thank you all for being my family. It meant a great deal to me to know I had this support during this time in my life. But I just want you to know that you know, this is a safe zone for all of us to be vulnerable. And there was a gentleman there from a moving company who was so nervous when he got up and spoke. And he spoke before the meeting, and then he spoke at the end of the meeting. And after I spoke, and I said, you know, don't be afraid to, you know, this is your safe zone. You're going to go out into this industry and you're going to speak at your community associations, and you're going to speak at political events, and you're going to speak in all these other venues. This is where you practice that. You practice it on us. We are a leadership development organization. Develop those skills here, because we're going to support you. We're going to give you positive feedback and useful criticism, but because we want you to do better in all you do. And he came up the second time, he goes, I am going to do so well this now, because I know it doesn't matter if I screw up. And excuse me. And it was just, so 2 points there, we made it a safe zone, not only for our business, but a safe zone to have that support of our extended family as well.
It's so true, and I kind of feel like it's almost the same even with, like, leadership academies too, where you just get so close to the people you're in the trenches with at times, and it's such a great thing because I think that when you feel supported, it helps us kind of expand and grow outside of our comfort zone to places that we never even saw possible.
Yeah.
So, I agree with that
Yeah.
wholeheartedly.
So I mean, mentorship can look a lot of different ways. And the thing that and I don't even know if it's still going around the council because I haven't heard it in a while, but we used to say you think of mentorship and here's the mentor and here's the mentee, and they're like here and here. But if in women's council, we used to say an exchange of value,
Mm, I love
because
it.
there are things that I can give to you, but I'm sure there are things that you could give to me. And that's not the traditional mentorship. That's, we said that's an exchange of value. And I can remember a networking event where we just said, what is your biggest value? And you would wear your tag and say, oh, I really need help with Instagram. I
Mm,
really need help with my local association, or bonding with my association, or here's my skill. Can I help you with that? And so it was an exchange of value as opposed to the traditional mentorship.
that's great. It is, and I love that exchange of value. I'm definitely going to, make sure to make notes about that one. But one of the questions was regarding advocacy, and I've been finding out that because especially in our industry, and especially in our local associations, we're constantly hearing about RPAC and major investors, and we hear it over and over. But that advocacy having a seat at the table in terms of advocacy with regard to Women's Council has only been in more recent years and not, kind of like the entire time, so to speak. So, were there any campaigns, or can you speak to any of like the advocacy kind of direction that you saw, and was any of it achieved during your time as president?
Um, you know, that, that's an interesting comment. Whether or not we achieved anything when it came to direct advocacy between the council and maybe our legislators, I'm not sure how that impacted us. Although there was actually a time when how we teach these education sessions at all our national meetings.
Right.
And there was a gentleman who was a realtor in Atlanta, and he came to a national meeting while we were in DC. He came over and addressed us, and he was very brief, and then he left his staff person there to talk about housing and how we do impact their decision making. So I do remember that, and I do remember holding an RPAC fundraiser in my room in Washington, D.C. because I had my dog traveled with me at the time, and he would hear all these, and he was the quietest little thing that even if I brought him into the office, people didn't even know I had him. But with all the clapping that was going on, he would bark in the other room. but
Great.
I think that's one of the biggest impacts that I think we've seen over the years, is that when you ask around the room in Women's Council who is a major investor and who is an FPC, and who has had an impact on the advocacy that we do as realtors. I think our group, our organization has one of the highest percentages of activity in the RPAC community. So, I mean, I think that's something to be really proud of too.
Yes. Definitely. So, how would you say that some of your earlier experiences at the local level shaped your approach toward national campaigns?
Well, I think we find our biggest challenges are at the local level sometimes.
Hmm.
And I think that at the time, so I'm not young anymore, but at the time I was probably one of the youngest people in the chapter when I came into local leadership. So I really relied on those around me to help guide me. But knowing when to say, look, this is my reputation on the line here. And you may be twice as old as I am and twice as long in the business than I am, but this is where we're going. And I hope you join us. We mending fences. I learned to mend fences in my year as local chapter president. And I think that had a huge impact on the leadership role that I played moving through the opportunities in leadership at Women's Council. When you have to learn to mend fences on the local level, mending fences on the state, regional, national levels is just becomes second nature.
Wow.
And that's part of listening and bringing value. I think they're the two things that helped me to mend fences. You know, reaching out to people whose fences were fallen and say, how can we help you rebuild? And them saying, well, thank you. You know, I'll give it another chance. And coming back and giving it another chance said to me, that's the way you do it. You reach out. And that's what we did is at National Leaders. You know, we reached back out to the local leaders, you know, so I think that had a huge impact. You know, I think, like I said, we train our leaders through experience. And those experiences take us from beginning to end, or on no end, from beginning to whenever, you know. And I think if I had anything that made a big impact on me, it was learning to mend fences and to listen.
So how would you say some of those skills kind of helped you post your national leadership, experience with Women's Council, even with your local Realtor Association, anything like that, that, you could say that you kind of were able to spearhead or kind of go in a different direction with in that regard?
Well, I will tell you my experience, because I had the leadership experience from Women's Council. Shortly after, so right after my year as president, I went right into 2 years on the NAR Executive Committee. And what that did for me here in Maryland was it gave me a spot on my local and state boards. And we had leadership that stepped back in our local association, and two leaders stepped back very quickly. So things were happening in their lives, things were happening in the industry, a lot of things were changing. And they came to me and said, will you step in to finish up the vice presidency for 2 months and then go into president-elect? You know, let them, we'll do an election at the meeting because you have to be elected to president-elect. He says, but would you step into that role to run for president-elect for us? Because we're not sure that, we know we have one more person in line, but that person probably needs another year on the line to learn the processes and things like that. And I said, I will, but I want to talk to that person. And I said, how do you feel about this? And it was a woman that I knew well. And she said, well, I have to tell you, I'm a little hurt that they didn't think I was ready to move up. She says, and it had been anybody but you, knowing your leadership background. She said, I probably would, say, no, this is not the way I want to do this. She said, but I think it'll be good for me too. And, in that process, I really believe that she became a better leader. And she also became one of my closest friends.
Oh,
Yeah. So, and What was the question? Am I answering it?
You absolutely are. And it actually wanted, I was thinking about segueing a little bit into some of, are there any lessons from any of the successes or setbacks that you've personally experienced that you maybe want to kind of, continue to discuss as well?
You know, I realize I think the biggest lesson is you're not going to make everybody happy. You're not going to make everybody happy, and not everybody's going to like you. And, for me, that was a tough one. And I had someone say to me at one point, a few years after my service at Women's Council, said, you're different than you used to be. And I went, no, I'm the same as I used to be. You're just starting to really see who I am, and it was an interesting lesson. I was constantly trying to say, why is this person objecting to me? Or what is it that I have done that, and I realized it wasn't. It was all on them, and I have to stop worrying about, how it just have to be me. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to be ourselves, and we can learn from our experiences to be better people, but we still have to be who we are.
Right.
And we're all different, and that's okay. And my leadership skills are going to be different than yours. And if you can learn one thing from me, that's great. But you know what? I'm probably going to learn something from you too. That hand on my arm taught me one of the biggest lessons I could ever learn. And it was a simple little gesture, just a hand on my arm to say, you don't have to respond. It's, little lessons that come along the way. And that has taken me so much further than I can ever explain to you, not only in leadership roles, but in my business as well. We take these lessons, and we have to understand, as realtors, we are leaders. I mean, we're handling one of the biggest transactions a person's ever going to have in their life, many of them anyway. And we are the leaders leading them through this transaction. So being blessed enough to have gone through the process through Women's Council all the way to our national line and service at NAR, I mean, those experiences will just have taken me in a different direction, not only in my business and in leadership in my business, but in my personal life too. It's even with your own kids. Sometimes the way you approach the questions and the situations, and knowing when to walk away, this experience has had a huge impact on my life.
Right.
And it's something that I never would have dreamed would have happened, but it's been one of the best experiences of my life, and has created some of the most amazing friendships of my life. Like I said, it is definitely my extended family.
So impactful. Well, as we kind of close out our time now, and in a kind of like maybe even a closing statement type of way, any sage words of wisdom, if I knew then what I know now, moments, or anything else, stories that you would love to share with our members?
Just do it. If you want to, if there is a member out there that says, oh my gosh, I would love to have that kind of an experience, don't let it stop you. Don't let anyone tell you to not do it. If this is what you want, but make sure it's what you want. Know that if you decide to do this, it's not because you have an agenda. It's not because you're going to be queen for a day. It's because you have this love and passion for this organization and for our industry, and you have something to give back. But don't let anyone stop you from doing it. Just go for it.
So true. This has been So, I mean, each one of these that I do and get to kind of know each one of our past national leadership, learn so much, not only about them, but just these little, and like you were saying, just these like little nuggets, these little things that we can kind of keep with us. And I feel like it really does help go a long way. But this has been such a great opportunity to get to know you better. Really cannot thank you enough for your service to, obviously where we are today in terms of the organization. But it's been this has been such a great opportunity. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you so much. I love that you're doing this. And I will keep my eye on you and what you're doing too.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. So 2013 past national president Anita Davis, thank you so much for everything. And I will hopefully get to see you soon, even in DC next week. But looking
I'll be there on Sunday.
forward to getting to chat further. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Take
All
care.
right.
Bye-bye.